Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Time with Tim. I'm Andy Carlson, and today I'm joined again by Jen. Some of you may remember her from an earlier episode where she shared her personal story and healing journey. If you haven't listened to that conversation yet, it's worth going back to. So grateful that you can join us again today.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Jen is a coach and a facilitator with the Tim Fletcher organization, and she's been leading a series of workshops on the emotional freedom technique, or EFT tapping, for Tim's Lift community. And so I thought it would be valuable to have Jen walk us through tapping in an experiential way to help us understand how it's used as a practical tool for nervous system regulation. But before we go into the EFT, I wanted to start with something a little bit more personal. And so, Jen, I was going to ask, what's something in your life right now that's bringing you a bit of ease and comfort?
Being able to take a minute, the mornings can be a little bit slower. And I've always pushed myself and said, oh, you should take advantage of this time while everybody's sleeping or not needing you. And, go do some dishes, go get caught up on this pile over there or that paperwork over here. And lately I've been able to just take a minute and just sit in my favorite spot in our house and really just take a rest. And if I fall back to sleep, it's okay. And because I know I
Mm.
have a certain amount of time. So really giving myself that freedom to sit. We talk about wintering at this time of year and kind of hunkering down and not pushing so much. And I'm actually taking that to heart this year, I feel like, and actually giving myself a moment to slow down. So yeah.
Just getting some actual rest and relaxation. Yeah, I like that. Since we're a community that's focused on healing from complex trauma, and so we're usually not afraid to dive into the deep end of vulnerability, I always like to ask people, what's a recent vulnerability that you've been navigating? Like maybe something that's raw, scary, tender, or that you've been working on. And I'll let you, since I'm springing this on you, I'll share something first to give you a chance to think. And for me, there's a couple of things that I've been working on, and like I've had kind of this constant chronic tension, chronic exhaustion, like in my head. Like there's a very hyper vigilant bracing part that's always just checking to see if I'm safe, checking to see if I'm doing the right thing. And I've done like a ton of work on it over the last 2.5 years. But one of the things like that comes back, a big component of it is this like false guilt, having just like always been accused in my childhood and my relationship of like raw, I'm tying my shoe and all of a sudden there's like something wrong and it's my fault. Uh, and so what's interesting is the weird thing is that like by working with it a lot, like focusing on it, it's like I'm still creating tension, and that
Mm.
is the part, looking at the part, keeping that part alive. And it's over like Christmas, I've started like just kind of like noticing and like, because a lot of times there's these thoughts that come up that are like self-accusatory or blaming.
Mm.
And it's so weird, but I've like just I'll say two things. And the first one is like, this is not a verdict of me. And then I pause for a second and I notice that like my life can continue, because usually there's like a kind of like a self attack of shame or a collapse. And it's kind of like I like step out of the present, and so like my life has always been really fragmented. What's interesting with this is like it's that's probably the biggest dramatic shift down in this part, which is a conglomeration of multiple things. But it's like, I don't know, my life feels weird now because there's like more continuity. Like I
Mm.
still
Yeah.
notice things come up, but it's not like it's like pulling me out of the present to the degree that it has been. And so it's something that I'm like, I'm really excited about, and really excited to continue to see what happens with this. Uh, and so hopefully that was long enough for you, Jen. What's something that's vulnerable for you that you've been thinking about or working on recently?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that we go into this healing journey with pain and these issues in our lives. and we just want to make it better, right? We just think that we need to have this life that's calm and everything goes well all the time, when actually, as we heal, we're taking off that tough armor and those masks that protected us, because on the inside we're sensitive, we have feelings, and to move into the world now healing, taking away some of that, those, maladaptive protective measures that we had. I had a conversation with some friends, and one friend said something about a situation she was going to, and I just felt for her, and I could feel it in my stomach. I was like, whoa, where is that coming from? And it's sort of this new normal, like you said, like this new continuity, different way of showing up, and it's not bad, it's not wrong, it's actually more healed. So that's been a weird thing, kind of something that I didn't really expect. For me right now, the most vulnerable, one of my kids, this is the fourth kid that has gotten their driver's license. And I'm not sure why this one is affecting me so much more. I think it has a little something to do with that I've had
Mm.
more masks and protective measures in the past, and more control maybe. And, as each one of these guys flies the nest and I lose a little more control, I think I am feeling more of my natural sensitivity than I did when the last driver started driving. But man, that has been hard right now, like watching her drive away. And I've got one that is a solo traveler. She was home for a couple of months and she just moved. So she didn't move. She started traveling in Thailand again, and it was nice having her home. So, yeah, some of those things, they're really coming from the outside, but I'm watching how I'm dealing with them differently on the inside, and kind of, yeah, like you said, how am I doing and what's going on? Somewhat of a hypervigilance, but also, yeah, just really being able to stay grounded and not freak out, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Like I hear, like kind of being with the vulnerability of
Yeah.
these new situations or places where control would have felt easier
Yeah.
in the
Totally.
past. Thanks for sharing that, Jen.
Yeah.
So before we jump into EFT, I just have a couple of quick questions for you. One is kind of like a disclaimer, asking for your disclaimer of this.
Yeah.
So part of this will be we'll do a guided experience later on in this conversation. So are there any disclaimers or guidance that you might usually give for people who may be listening while driving or walking or just doing something that requires their full attention?
Yeah, the nice thing about tapping is you don't have to be too worried about. I tap while I'm driving all the time. Keep your eyes open, of course, but it's not like a guided meditation where you really get into sort of a different state of mind where you may be a little more sleepy or a little more fully focused on the internal. But certainly we always use caution, right? So, if you feel like you're gonna, not be paying as much attention, especially if you're driving or what have you, be careful for sure. But it's a really easy thing to do for 1 minute, 10 minutes, whatever, and you don't have to go too far from your normal state of mind to be able to feel some of the benefits of it.
Okay. And are there any situations where you'd suggest that people do just listen rather than participate?
Hmm, that's a good question. If you're gonna feel nervous or embarrassed, because this involves, actually moving your hand and, tapping on certain spots, I think if you feel embarrassed about that, you might wanna wait. If the idea of doing this in front of other people feels odd, then maybe wait until you're more comfortable with it, because you don't wanna attach those kind of feelings to the practice. You want it to be
Mhm.
a healing moment for yourself. So give yourself some time to kind of get used to the idea. And, there's several spots that you can tap. Maybe there's one I like, my collarbone. I feel like I can do that without being noticed as much. And it doesn't make me feel embarrassed or weird in any way. But if you feel those kind of feelings creeping up, or if you feel overwhelmed at the idea, maybe just, give it a little while and listen to the podcast again or look at some other resources and help yourself kind of ease into it a little bit. Don't force it.
So I think that's great, like having some the right space and the right time
Yeah.
for doing that part of it. And so, for someone who's never encountered EFT before, like how do you explain what tapping is in simple terms to them?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say it's a self-help tool to help you regulate. And it's a mind-body connection is really where the power is, which is such a great thing. And it's so easy. And we're using just our hands on different acupressure points in our mostly the head, mostly the upper body here, to send signals to the amygdala, to the brain, to calm down and to find a space of grounding and moving forward in life after that. So it's pretty easy tool to use. You don't need special training. I don't have any training or certifications. There's certainly things like that out there. But I'm just a normal girl who saw it one day and started to use it. And yeah, you don't need to have special knowledge, or you don't have to practice it every day. Some people find that that's the best for them and they're able to keep up a regular ritual of that. But yeah, so that kind of explains just the overview of the tool itself.
Mm. You mentioned the amygdala. From your perspective, like what's happening internally when someone is tapping and working on an emotional experience?
Yeah, you're able to engage with the brain, engage with these emotions. Maybe something triggered you here and now, but you know that it's connected to something from your past, or you're on a healing journey and you're starting to make some of those connections. When the brain brings up a memory, it's an opportunity to reprogram that memory. It doesn't always have to be something that is painful. If it was a bad memory, it's always, things happen to people that are not good. And it's not that we fix that side of it, but the brain brings it back up again and we can have a different interaction with that memory. We can have a different experience with it. We can maybe learn a lesson, whatever is healing for that person. The brain can bring that out, and before it refiles it, we can have a different experience with it and then put it away, and it will you will be able to relate to it differently. Some things, some memories, some people might take a longer time to do that. I wouldn't necessarily promise anybody that in one tapping session, this one memory or all of their memories are going to be more easy to relate to. But for sure, some memories can be like that, and some situations can be like that. Some things, there's takes a lot of different pieces, thinking, going through, talking to other people about what we're going through. Maybe not just tapping, but definitely tapping helps with the physical side of things.
Hmm. So a little bit of what I'm hearing here is it sounds almost like there's a combination of like exposure work and then also regulation work at the same time. Does that like framing fit for you,
Yeah.
or would you
Yeah,
describe
because
that?
the tapping sends the signals to the brain. That comforting, if I don't know, I'm one who likes to be in a car, and I think, the vibration, the driving kind of helps. That's sort of, I feel like for me, is mimicked in the tapping. That's the physical side of it. And you're also either focusing mentally or actually speaking out loud about a situation, about a feeling. And that can bring in the cognitive behavioral therapy part of it, the talk therapy, where you're not only thinking of it, but you're speaking it, and now you're dealing with your body as you've got a lot of senses going into this, that are kind of focusing in on this situation or this memory or this feeling. And yeah, as you go through, you're kind of reprogramming how that feels.
Mm. And I brought this up before we started talking here on the podcast, but like, you know, for some people, maybe this sounds like new agey or energy work rather than psychologically based or neuroscience under it. Like, how do you explain that or bridge that gap for people?
The nice thing about tapping is it's been around for a really long time. I first ran into it probably almost 20 years ago, just shy of 20 years ago. So let's say 15, 16 years ago. And there's so much science that has been done on it, actual research. I know we can sometimes talk about research that isn't actually research or things that people are trying to say that to make something sound more scientifically backed. But this, I've put together several workshops for Tim Fletcher Company, and digging into this research, it really it is not woo woo. It's definitely backed by a lot of concrete science that shows as they, survey people's brains or, keep track of what's happening during the tapping session. You can see things calming down and people feel better as they're using it. So yeah, definitely not a snake oil, right? And you have to know yourself. You have to have the right expectation going in. Like I said, it's certainly not going it's not a all you need is tapping and you tap one time and it's going to fix everything. We at Tim Fletcher Company, look at things holistically, and there's tools and there's, other things. There's many tools that you can use. So, but it's definitely I found a lot of success with it.
I think that's important to note, like that
Yeah.
it's one tool in the tool bag that we can be reaching for. So
Yeah.
you mentioned, the workshops. And so when people are brand new to tapping, are you noticing certain things that maybe are there some common misunderstandings or things that they brace against when they're first exposed to it?
I think the talking part of it can be a little difficult because it starts to feel like I have to say the right thing. I have to know what to say, during this 10-minute time segment where we're going through the tapping points. I think that is one common misconception. And my answer to that is you can do tapping without any words. There's a lot of people online, trusted people that have been doing this since before I ever found out about it. And they will walk you through, different scripts, different tapping sessions so that, you feel like you have somebody to follow a little bit until you start to get more used to it. And then you start to feel a little bit better about, okay, I know myself. But that I would say is maybe a little bit more difficult. And again, knowing kind of when and where to do it, if you're feeling nervous about it. Um, and and being able to find that time and place can sometimes be a little daunting.
And like, do people, so if I come in, I'm like, oh, this is going to make me feel better. This is going to make me feel great. Like, what are some common things that people may assume that it's going to do that maybe you need to, like just gently correct, like a belief about it beforehand?
Yeah, like anything, it's definitely not the magic wand, right? There's work that we have to do. We're not gonna go download a session from somebody else and follow what they're saying, and everything is magically gonna be okay. Or the first time you use something, it's like anything. The first time you do any kind of work on yourself, even, figuring out a new tool in real life, the first time people use a drill or what, they don't always know exactly how it operates, how it works. So the very first time it's going to feel weird. It may not even work, let's say. Maybe you don't feel better. Maybe you feel a little more activated because you were nervous about using the tool. That doesn't necessarily mean it won't work. It just means we need a couple more times to get used to it. So I would say those are some common, yeah, things to correct. Give yourself a
Mhm.
minute with it. Give yourself a couple of times, um, and being able to kind of follow through on that would be helpful. Give it some time.
Mhm. And I've heard in your workshops you mention honesty over positivity. And could you explain why that's important in
Yeah.
tapping?
Yeah, one of the things we do in tapping, the first point we touch on is the side of the hand, and we call that the setup. We only do that one at the beginning, and then the other points we go through, but we don't revisit that hand, and that kind of introduces your body, gets your body ready. But the things that you're saying are kind of acknowledging the issue and setting things up, getting yourself ready. And we say, even though I'm feeling, or even though this situation, and we put a little bit of our own description in there. And we close that sentence with, I still love and accept myself. And for some people, that doesn't feel authentic. For some people in that moment, maybe you're at the very beginning of your healing journey. Maybe you've never considered that type of self-compassion, self-love, that you'd be able to say that to yourself and believe it. If you can't say it and believe it, you have, like you said, honesty over the positivity. I'm just going to say it until I believe it. And for some people that works. I wouldn't knock that if it's something that somebody has worked with before and they got to a point where they believed it. That's great. But for me, I needed to say, I can consider loving myself. I know that, you have to find your own statement that truly feels honest, that truly feels right for you. I would never, even if you have to stop the session and think, okay, wait, how am I going to actually phrase this? Maybe you write it, maybe you write down, I love and accept myself, and you start to plug in other words there until there's something that feels authentic and honest. Like, yep, that I can say out loud, and I know that I believe that. So that, yeah, honesty, I think, is one of the key points.
Yeah, I joke with clients sometimes, like sometimes we have to lawyer our shame. And so
Mm,
replacing that, maybe a more direct affirmation with something that sounds just more real to ourselves, something that our body can accept in
yeah.
this moment. Could you maybe just give us the range of experience with what we might say and how we'd say it?
Yeah. Yeah, so like I said, you start with the side of the hand, and we're just tapping whatever kind of pressure feels right for you. Some people like to really, get in there, and some people just do a little more gentle. And we, like I said, start acknowledging what's going on. I'm feeling anxious right now. And so even though I'm feeling anxious right now, I still love and accept myself. And we go through that 3 times, either the same phrase each time or maybe a little bit different, but I'm feeling overwhelmed by anxiety right now, and I still love and accept myself. I am feeling all kinds of anxiety everywhere in my body, and I still love and accept myself. Just kind of what feels right, and really just, again, being honest and describing what's going on right now. Why am I sitting down and wanting to do this? And really just being honest with ourselves about what's happening. And you can think through that if you're in a public place and you don't feel like saying it out loud. Even I believe even speaking it to yourself, saying it inside, is powerful as well. So we start there, and then we continue just acknowledging and describing as we tap on the other points. I'll go through those more specifically later, but if we're
Hmm.
focusing on the words, we continue to kind of explore what's going on and maybe put some imagery with it. What does it feel like? What does it look like? What color is it? Is there a temperature or a texture? And, it feels white all over my body, because sometimes that white hot, there's a certain heat to that. It feels almost white, or makes me feel dark and blue. It makes, or red, or, different textures and things that you can really get into, really acknowledging what's happening and connecting with that. And then there starts to become a shift. So once we've gone through all of that, and maybe for some people, it's only a couple of statements. And that's totally okay. You don't have to go on and on and on. But if that's helpful, it's good to really get into all of those nooks and crannies. um,
Mm.
really acknowledge what's happening. And then we start to explore it a little bit. Start to think about releasing it, but acknowledging what's happening for me, and why, and anyone that might be involved, or any situation that might be involved. And then we start to go into the release mode. So exploring is just kind of whatever comes up, what's happening with the situation. But then we can start to, and okay, I'm feeling all this anxiety all over my body, and I've thought about why and where it comes up. And then we can start to transition into, and maybe it's okay. Maybe I'm able to let go of a little bit of this anxiety. What would it look like? Even just asking yourself questions, what would it look like if I let go of some of this anxiety? And start to direct yourself to that healing moment, to being able to see the light at the not the end of the tunnel. I don't want to make it sound like everything's going to be fixed, but being able to move past it, and what would it feel like to be on the other side of this moment of anxiety. And then as we close it up, there's the empowerment that I'm proud of myself for doing this. I'm glad that I sat down, and we're tapping while we're saying these things. And really just being able to empower yourself, congratulate yourself a little bit, acknowledge what you sat down and did, that it meant something, and that you spent even 2 minutes, 5 minutes on yourself, on your healing, working with this feeling, not running from it, not stuffing it, not hiding from it, just really being very honest with yourself. That's a big deal. And so if you can acknowledge that at the end, and and I'm going to remember this feeling, and I'm going to, anything that you can do to congratulate yourself and bring yourself to somewhat of a closure. And that's sort of so those words, acknowledgement, exploration, release, and empowerment, is what helps me kind of move through
Mm.
that in a way. If you stay only in acknowledgement and you just talk about how bad it feels, I think with the tapping, it could still provide some relief, but you could also run the risk of keeping yourself in that spot. And now you stop tapping, and now you're still feeling agitated, you're still feeling anxious, and maybe it's down a notch, but um if you stay in acknowledgement and you're only talking about how bad it feels, you might not gain as much ground as if you work through the whole script.
So I'm hearing there's kind of like these four main components to it: the acknowledge, explore, release, and empower. Do I want to kind of like pre-plan what I'm going to say beforehand? Do I need examples? Because like I can imagine for myself, like having difficulty, uh, maybe with the release or the empowerment part of it, like seeing that, what's on the other side of whatever difficulty it is that I'm having.
Yeah, I would say, and I don't mean to try to make these answers too easy, but it works either way. It depends on the person. If, like you said, if you know you're struggling with something, and okay, I have a quiet moment tomorrow morning and I'm going to work through this, it might be wise to write down. You're going to struggle with the empowerment side of it. It might be wise to write some things down. I don't think planning ahead would negatively impact it, but I think if you're, in the middle of a park and you can't find the people you're supposed to meet up with, and you're feeling that, and you just need to start tapping, and and the words just come, or you just tap without any words because that's how you're feeling in the moment, I think that works too. So I don't mean to be too loosey-goosey about it, but you can really tailor this tool to wherever you're at, whatever you need in the moment. And probably all of us will have moments where it's just something we're going to use in a second without any pre-planning. But then there are bigger issues in our lives that we're then going to need to tackle, and kind of think about a little bit, and kind of work through it. And maybe we want to write some things down, or just think for a couple of minutes before we move into the actual session with ourselves. So either way works.
Mm-hmm. And you did mention too that like often we could find this and do this as a guided, and so
Yeah.
do it as a guided process several times until we
Yeah.
become comfortable with it. Yeah, I want to make a side note, as for anybody who's listening. There's a point you talked about tapping on the side of your hand,
Mm.
and then there's some tapping that you did here as well, like that I'm watching you do. So it may be beneficial to rewatch this on YouTube if you're just listening to it. But could you maybe talk about the different points that we would tap on, and then like describe? So if like, how would you describe this part of your hand, so that somebody who's listening could know where and how the tapping is occurring.
Yeah. Yeah, so that first setup point is if you hold up your hand and look at your pinky finger and go down to the side of your palm on that side of your hand. And one finger, two fingers, for some reason with the side of the hand, I end up using all four fingers of the other hand. So I have my right hand up in front of me and I've got the pinky finger facing my left side, and I'm tapping with my left hand then on that point. Um, and and then the rest of them, so it starts with, if you go to your eyebrow, the inner eyebrow. So, right, where kind of where your eyebrows get close together, either one side or the other. And again, one finger, two fingers, and whatever pressure feels good to you, we're tapping. Now, for some people, even tapping is a little too much. Like maybe they're feeling sensory overload. Maybe they just got home from a party and the thought of tapping is just like too much. You can actually just hold a little bit of pressure there. You don't actually even have to tap it. You can hold the pressure there. And sometimes that can be a little more soothing, kind of depending on where you're at. And this is one of those things that we kind of play around with. One session, we tap a little more vigorously, a little harder. One session, we just do it a little more gently and kind of see how that feels. And it might just depend on what state your body is in and what issue you're working on. So we're doing the inner of the eyebrow, sorry. We're tapping there. And then the outer side of the eye, and this can be either side of your body. I tend to stay first on the right side. So on my right eye, that inner eyebrow, and then I follow the eyebrow along to the outer eye. And you can feel sort of that, but where that bone ends, right as you come to your eyeball, and I'm tapping there a little bit. And then under the eye, kind of again, following that bone around, and still being under the eye, not too much on the cheekbone. Um, and then, so all of those, I'm staying on the right-hand side and I'm using my right hand right now. You could use your left hand, you could switch, you could do both at the same time if you wanted to. So we go from inner eyebrow, outer eyebrow, under the eye, and then under the nose. So right above your lip, right below your nose, tapping there for a little bit. And then right under your bottom lip, kind of the crease right before your chin. So we go right in there. And then right around the collarbone. So I feel where the points of my collarbone are, and I go down just a little bit. And this one too, for some reason, I end up using all four fingers. And a lot of times I do both sides at the same time, even if all the other ones I've done one hand on one side. For some reason, the collarbone, but you can do it one hand with one finger, however you need to do that. And then there is one that is under the arm, so about a hand width underneath your armpit. So you're tapping there for a little bit. That's one that a lot of people skip because, especially if you're out in public, it just feels a little awkward. But if you're home alone, it's helpful, but you can skip it if you feel like it. And then the final one is on the top of the head. Some people just do one finger. One of the workshops I gave, the people said, "Oh, it felt better if I used all five fingers on both hands to do that." They felt like it really they got more points there and it felt a lot better. So, and then we just keep repeating. The top of the head is sort of the last one in the round. And you can go through that as many times as you want, just in the acknowledgement part. But maybe you only go, through the eye points and you feel done with the acknowledgement part, and you can move on. You don't have to do one full round of tapping for each section of that script part of the talking
Mm.
part. Kind of whatever feels right. When you run out of words for that section, you move on to the next section. And like you said, I do think those last two portions, the release and the empowerment, are a little bit harder as you get started when you're not very far into your healing journey. That can be hard to think about loving yourself, and maybe you only have one sentence for that and you only tap on one point at that moment. That's totally fine. And you don't have to end with your head. It's totally fine. It's just your body responding. And yeah, like you said, like it can sound a little maybe new agey or woo woo a little bit. I don't necessarily feel like there's energy loops you have to close or anything. I've always felt good afterwards. So stop
Mm.
wherever you feel like stopping.
I'll just report. I noticed, kind of with the tapping the hand, like I could feel a little bit of like pressure coming out of my face a little bit.
Yeah.
And then I also noticed with when we paused on that inner eyebrow, just like a little bit like more kind of like a sense of like grounding and a little bit of
Mm,
presence, like just even just doing
yeah.
these points. So I
Yeah.
want to run through these again quick. So there's it's the just to make sure that I caught them all is so there's the beneath the outside of the palm of the hand, beneath the pinky, and we could use two or all of our fingers tapping that. And then you move to the kind of the inner eyebrow. Like, so I was tapping like right on my eyebrow on the inside there. Is that the right
Yep.
point?
Perfect. Yeah.
Okay.
And anywhere, it's very forgiving. Anywhere in there. Sometimes I kind of want to go under my eyebrow a little bit, sometimes
Mm,
above my eyebrow, sometimes right in the middle. Experiment with what feels good. And actually, sometimes moving from that point to the next one, I'll actually just tap all the way along because it feels good for me.
mm, mm-hmm. And then the one that was on the side is that it's so it's kind of above the jawbone, but
Yeah,
it's
I would
just
say, like,
straight.
actually touch the outer corner of your eye and
Mm-hmm.
go back from your eye a little bit just so you're not poking yourself
Okay.
in the eye, but you should almost be able to feel the end of that bone there, so you're right next to your eye. So
Mm,
and again, it's very forgiving, if you move around a little bit, when you use more fingers, you hit more points at the same
mm-hmm.
time, and again, even if you just need to sit and hold a little pressure on there.
And then the next one, so it seems that like these three are, it's kind of like around, like all like right around the eye, but like
Yeah.
kind of the edge of the bone of where there's
Mhm,
it becomes softer almost
mhm.
with the eye. Yeah.
Yeah.
So on the top of the chin, like above the chin, but right below the eye. I'm noticing how baggy my eyes are today. Uh,
Yeah, we all have that, right?
yeah. And then so right beneath the nose was the
Yep,
other one. And so just two fingers kind of like
yep,
on that upper lip. And then it was like so right beneath the lower lip there, kind of like above the chin.
yeah,
And then you went to the collarbone, and that I can feel mine right away. And so you
yeah.
said both hands there. And
Mhm,
then maybe or maybe not a finger of a hand's width beneath, like so kind of
mhm.
like the mid chest
Yeah,
on the ribs
yep,
in a way. Okay.
and then
Um and you did mention here a little bit like what happens if um somebody like starts to get overwhelmed or the intensity is too high for them.
I would stop talking because that is generally the place where that intensity is because you're bringing up emotions, and the more you describe, the more you talk about it, it can lead you into some pretty deep places. So if you're starting to feel like this is too much, stop talking, but keep tapping because then the tapping will help ground you. It's sending those signals to your brain to be able to calm down, to switch over into the cortex instead of your limbic. So definitely keep tapping until you're able to get a sense of peace, maybe a sense of being grounded. One signal for me is like a spontaneous sigh or like a deep breath that just kind of happens on its own,
Mhm.
or a yawn. That generally signals that you're going into the parasympathetic nervous system rather than the on guard sympathetic nervous system. And that's always a good sign for me. It's one of those tangible ways that I feel like, oh, it's working. So
Mhm. And like so you're mentioning like always do the tapping, the voice, the words can be beneficial, but maybe not necessarily if you're super triggered. Is there any other ways that you'd use tapping different if you're highly activated versus mildly triggered?
yeah, if you're highly activated, it depends on the person. You could experiment with it, but if you're just not feeling relief from it, or if it's, kind of feels like it's tangling your brain a little more, you might want to just notice your breath first. you could be at a too high of a level of being triggered, where the tapping is just too much because you're having to think about the words. You're thinking about where your hands are. Maybe you just put your hand on your heart and feel your breath for a minute. It's a little less intense, and maybe you don't tap at all at that moment, and that's okay. I wouldn't say this is a tool that fixes everything all the time. You gotta, and it's hard. We don't all know ourselves right away, right? Like it takes a little bit of trial and error. Like, is this gonna work? I want to try it, and be okay with it. Maybe not working in certain situations, or I don't like the hard tapping. I like just the pressure, and that's okay. Or if you find something totally different that I've never even thought of as far as a combination or a way of doing it, you this tool is so malleable to who you are, where you are in the moment. Maybe this morning you did it and it felt good doing it one way, and this afternoon, by the end of the day, it feels totally different and you want to do it a completely different way. So all of those things are okay, but experimenting with it is probably the best way to figure out how each of those
There's
lands.
a lot of flexibility with it. And so, we haven't really talked about yet, but like, what do you work on with tapping? Like, what are kind of the categories? What are the issues or the things that, how do you choose what you're going to be to use this with?
Yeah. Yeah, I can't think of anything to not use it with. I've used it with my own kids. I taught a workshop for parents to use it with their children, and we call it big feelings. Whatever a child understands in their world with their family, whatever they're calling different emotions, um, can be, and kids are dealing with, a different situations than an adult would work with, but I think it works no matter what, and whether it's, an external thing, maybe there's a situation at work, maybe there's a person you're dealing with, to go through that and process the emotions coming up with that, or it's a fully internal thing. It's my anxiety, it's my fear about this, or, you woke up and realized you had a bad dream. Even I can't think of anything to not work on it with, I work on it, nerves going into a workshop or facilitating, or, feeling scared with something with my kids, or frustrated with my husband, or, any of life's daily issues, I think is a good thing to start trying on.
So I'm hearing you say like anxiety, fear, maybe different types of anger, conflict,
Mhm.
that there's a
Yeah.
wide variety. What about like how specific do you get versus general? Do I just work on anxiety, or do I work on I'm anxious that I'm going to be doing this workshop later? Like how
Yeah.
detailed do you get with it?
I think you can be general, but I think the more detailed you can get, the better. And for some people, they have to start out more general because it feels less concentrated and less, I don't want to necessarily think about all of the little details of my anxiety in some moments, or because the tool is new. So you just say, oh, these big feelings, these big feelings, these big feelings. And you don't even change it up at all. You say the same thing over and over again just to get a feel for it. But I do think the more focused you can get, the more headway you'll make in that specific area, because each one of us, I think, will find that I might have 15 triggers throughout the day, but if I really drill them down, they end up with maybe 2 or 3 roots.
Right.
I discovered during Lyft, one of mine was feeling stupid, feeling like I did something stupid or somebody thinks I'm stupid. And that root cropped up in so many different ways in my life. I might have been triggered again 15 times throughout the day, and most of those times it was because I felt stupid. So, depending on which end you want to work with, you might feel the trigger. And as you get more specific, you end up coming to the same root over and over again, but then you can make more headway. But the more specific you can be, you discover more of those roots and figure out what are some of my main triggers, and kind of being able to explore that is really helpful.
So like some of your comment like shame triggers would be really I could see it would be really valuable to do this with.
Yeah, definitely.
And what if somebody feels overwhelmed by like too many choices, like they're having a hard time finding a specific route. They've got, they have 15 things, but they can't
Yeah.
choose the one. Like where would you recommend that they begin?
Yeah, I think that's where the general, I you know, the general idea of what you're feeling is good, and even if you say the same thing every day, every session for a week, you're still it's still progress because you're sitting down. You're not ignoring it. You're sitting down, you're doing something about the way you feel. So, if you just know that you feel off, you just feel off. You don't even know what more to assign to it other than I feel more yucky today than I did yesterday. I just feel like something is weird. And you just say that. I feel something is weird. I feel something off is going on. And you just kind of talk to it. I think that's okay. I don't think you have to choose. And as you go further into it, either on your own healing journey outside of tapping or just tapping itself as you get more skilled with the tool, it'll start to make more sense and you won't have to stay upper level. But I think that's a perfect place to start.
I like the something yucky is going on because
Mhm.
sometimes when it's hard to find that shame root or the specific feeling that's going on, like I know what yucky feels like. I know what
Yeah, right. We know
upset
yuck.
feels like. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ooh, I'm thinking that this might be a good time to move towards like doing the practice. Before we do so, do you feel is there anything that maybe we should explain first, or anything that we might not have covered before we go into a guided practice?
Yeah, I think it's good to check in on yourself first. Where am I at? So, let's set up the maybe more perfect example. Maybe you're in your room, you're got a couple of minutes by yourself, you don't have anywhere to go, anywhere to be, right? That's sort of the picture perfect moment, right? Where you don't always have to use it that way, but just to for explaining right now, where you feel free to talk out loud, you have the time to do what you need to do. It's still not going to take hours or anything like that, but you don't feel rushed. You don't feel like I only have 1 minute and I got to move on. So, and again, all of these parts don't have to be done. It won't not work if you don't check in with yourself, but it's good to have that baseline. So if I know this is a moment where I want to work on something, I'm going to maybe if I'm feeling okay and I have this time scheduled, I'm not sitting down to work because I'm activated, but I know I was activated yesterday, so I want to work on that thing. I might have to recall the situation and then give it a number. Okay, how did that situation make me, how triggered did that make me feel? And because numbers are kind of an equalized baseline, I felt a 9 in that moment where I'm normally a 2. But whatever works for you, for kids, sometimes it won't be a number like that. Maybe for them, it felt like this or it felt like this, where you're adjusting the size of your hand or how close they are together for those that are listening and not watching. But some scale, some rating of where am I at right now? Or where was I at with that situation? For me, if I just have a minute, where am I at right now? How am I feeling? Maybe I'm feeling a little activated because I know tomorrow is going to be really busy. And so maybe I'll put myself at a 4 or a 5. You don't always have to work on it if you're at a 10. And I would say as you're starting, maybe 4 or 5 is good because you're learning the tool and you're trying to figure all of this out. So even practicing when you're fully relaxed and feel like you don't have any issues going on is okay too. So you give yourself a rating and then you can start with the tapping and the setup and going all the way through. And then after you're done, take a deep breath and then go back to that rating. Even if I feel 1% better, that's a step in the right direction. And if you have time, you might want to do it again and see if you can get even better. If you don't have time, you know that you made a little move and you might make a note of, I didn't feel like I said this very well, or I like this kind of pressure better than that kind of pressure. And kind of make a note to yourself so you remember for next time. But so the setup and the ending, checking back in with that initial setup is something that we hadn't talked about yet, and I think that can be valuable. Again, it's not absolutely necessary. Don't not do any tapping if you don't have time for those pieces, but I think it's helpful to get kind of a baseline of how this is working for you.
Mhm. I like having that rating, and one of the things that I hear you say too is before doing this, it's like finding a place where you feel free to talk, that you don't when you don't feel rushed. Maybe a space like with the tapping where you're not embarrassed, where there's some level of privacy, or that you're just doing the points that you feel that can be done discreetly or okay doing in public. And then, but also like checking in with yourself. And I like too what you said about it sounds really important to begin with the fours or fives, maybe rather than necessarily learning something new as a 10. Um, and so before we move into this, is there anything else that you'd want listeners to keep in mind as they decide whether or not to go along with us today?
Um, yeah, like we said at the beginning, if you're engaged, if you're listening to this, and you're engaged in something else, you may want to just listen, or driving just because it's new for you. But other than that, I wouldn't be too worried about too many other situations. So
All right. Would you want to lead us in a tapping session and a kind of in a
yeah.
full round with like the
Yeah.
acknowledge, explore, release, and empower?
Yeah. So get comfortable where you are. Feel the chair under you. Maybe close your eyes if you want to. And first, notice your breath. And let's go to that baseline. How are we feeling right now compared to a just chill, relaxed moment, which would be a 1 or a 0? Maybe there's a memory that's coming up for you. Maybe there's just a feeling, maybe some tenseness somewhere. However, it shows up, give yourself a rating. Maybe you're at a 4 or a 5, and you know how that feels in your body. And throughout the session, you can keep your eyes closed or open them at times, whatever feels most comfortable. And now we're going to think of a situation, a memory, a person, a feeling that keeps cropping up that we would want to work on. Something that might sometimes cause us to feel a little more triggered, or something that we feel is accessible right now to think about, to work with. And to make it general, I'll call these big feelings. You can add whatever words in or use different words. And so we'll start with the side of the hand. You can start tapping there. Even though I have all of these big feelings, I still love and accept myself. And so I'll say the phrase first, and you can repeat it in your mind. For those of you that are listening, you can repeat it out loud if you would like. Even though I feel all of these big feelings, I still love and accept myself. Even though these feelings feel yucky, I still love, accept, and forgive myself. And then we'll start the regular round with the inside of the eye, tapping gently with a couple fingers. All of these big feelings. Moving to the outer eye, all of these big feelings. Under the eye, so overwhelming. under the nose, feeling so heavy. Moving to the chin, all of these big feelings. Moving to the collarbone. Why do these feelings keep coming up? Under the arm. I really don't like these feelings. Top of the head. I want to run away from these feelings. Inner eyebrow. These feelings make me angry. Side of the eye. I'm really mad that I have these feelings. Under the eye. All these big feelings. Under the nose. Feel sometimes like I can't get away from all these big feelings. Under the mouth. And as I focus on them, maybe I can start to understand them a little bit. Collarbone. As I look at them, I can see them for what they are. Under the arm. I can see that it's my body protecting me. Top of the head. Protecting me from things in my past. So inner eyebrow. Protecting me from things that have hurt me. Outer eye. Helping me to deal with life as it comes. Under the eye. And I wonder what it would be like if I could start to let go of some of these feelings. Under the nose. I wonder what it would feel like to understand these feelings. At the chin. I think I can start to see what's happening. Collarbone. I think I can start to see what these feelings are doing. Under the arm. And I can thank these feelings for protecting me, for doing their best. Top of the head. And I can tell these feelings that I can start doing this job of protecting. Inner eyebrow. I'm glad that I did this. Outer eye. I'm glad that I looked at these feelings. Under the eye. I'm proud of myself for focusing on myself. Under the nose. I'm proud of myself that I can start to feel better. Under the mouth. I'm proud of myself. Collarbone. I can start to feel better. Under the arm. I can consider that I deserve to feel better. Top of the head. I deserve to feel better. Then we'll put our hands in our lap. Take one more deep breath. And rate how you're feeling compared to how you were feeling at the beginning. Maybe notice any changes in your body, changes in the rate of your breathing. Taking another moment just to soak it all in and be thankful for the moment that you gave yourself. Take one more deep breath as you start to open your eyes and come back to today.
Thanks for doing that with us,
Mhm.
Jen. It was kind of interesting. I worked. I kind of thought about that internal monitor that I spoke about in the vulnerability, and what was interesting during this, like with the tapping. So like I often kind of like feel it's this tension in the forehead. So a lot of what we were doing was almost like around it, but not it. And
Yeah.
so like there's like more of a sense, like if I think of like being kind of fused with it a lot, like there's just a sense of like recognizing other parts, like that there's more to me than this part that's constantly monitoring and constantly tense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, but I wanna ask you, like, what do you usually invite people to notice after doing a round of tapping?
Yeah, I think I like to guide more generally because I feel like if I put too much description into it, I end up describing what I'm feeling. And if it can kind of miss the mark for other people, right? We
Mm,
all kind of
mm-hmm.
use different words. So yeah, noticing maybe a tension or a hot or a cold or just any differences from the beginning to the end. Some people know that when their shoulders are tense, that's another symptom of their triggers, of being triggered. So maybe if they notice their shoulders are high, maybe their shoulders have dropped a little bit. Some people hold it in their face, in their forehead, and that's a really great spot then for the tapping because that goes right directly, like you were saying, to right where you're feeling the pressure. Um, and maybe how they're talking to themselves as well. Maybe that, like you said, that internal monitor, sometimes we call it the, other people for different reasons would call it an inner critic maybe, where, our self-talk isn't so kind sometimes. And maybe once you've been able to kind of take a breath and focus in a little bit more, maybe when you come up out of the session, maybe that voice isn't so loud, or maybe it's saying different things, or maybe it's just not saying anything for a little while. So kind of noticing it's good to notice nuances. It doesn't have to go from a 10 to a 1. It might not be that big of a move, but maybe your shoulders just went down halfway and that's progress.
Mm-hmm. I like that. I often tell people with any somatic work or grounding work, like I see this as a nudge that helps us to move from, yeah, maybe a 9 to a 7 or a 7 to a
Yeah.
5. But we're not normally going to be feeling bliss
Yeah.
immediately after doing this type of work. So you mentioned like some of like the shoulders going down and some of these other things that you notice. Like what kind of responses do people usually give? Like what kind of responses have people given in your workshops right after tapping?
Yeah, just feeling a little lighter, a little more stable, and just think that tapping, that vibration, um, won't claim to be a scientist, but I really believe there's something to that vibration that helps us ground more, and people just feel, I think, more peaceful. If I had to, kind of summarize all the different comments from the different workshops and stuff, but I know one lady just said, "Man, it made a huge change for her." She had never seen anything like it when we started the workshops with Tim Fletcher, and it really made she just felt less angry. She was able to move past her anger and get to a place of peace, more at least more peaceful than where she was at, and she's one that was really struggling with a lot of anger, and it was really helpful for her. So that's one comment that is always a highlight for me because a couple of different people that she was working with said, "Wow, that's really been helpful for her." So
Mm. And so, yeah, we could feel steady or more stable or more peaceful. What if like somebody like didn't really feel anything or much of anything, like how would you help them understand that experience?
Yeah, I might ask, a couple of questions. How did they feel going into it? Is it brand new for them? Were they able to really focus in? Because sometimes if we're pushing too hard, oh, I have to do this. This is the right thing to do. Maybe that's a signal that now's not a good time, or maybe now is a good time to pick one spot and just tap for a minute, or just kind of hold pressure and just give it 30 seconds. And so if you feel any kind of pushing, I would say that's maybe not going to be as helpful. It's okay to not do it. There's no should, there's no have to in tapping. You as we've said, kind of covered quite a bit here, that it's malleable to where you're at and how you're feeling. And if you want to do it, and it still just feels like it hasn't given you that shift, maybe dig into that. Maybe stop for a second, and I would guide somebody through, let's is there well, I should have done that, or because sometimes we feel like we have to be perfect at it, or after the end of the session we maybe are criticizing ourselves too much. Oh, I said that wrong, and I didn't, oh, I missed that spot, I moved from the or the eyebrow to the chin, or if we're criticizing ourselves, we're maybe trying to discover some of the things that are contributing to that. And it's possible it was just a difficult time. And either the tool is too new or it just felt, trust your intuition, trust yourself to know that it's okay to not do it. It's okay to just sit and put your hand over your heart and breathe. I think that self-acceptance, self-compassion, um, it gets exercised here, right? Where if you start to feel like this isn't working for me, let's dig into why, but let's keep that self-compassion where it's okay. And I have at least one client who is like, it just doesn't work for me. And she has, some thoughts about it, and that's totally fine. If it doesn't work, regardless of why it doesn't work for a person, it's not gonna work, and that's okay. I wouldn't, ever say that it's definitely gonna work for everybody, but definitely everybody should try.
Mm. And I hear there, do you ever do 2 rounds back to back? Because when I hear you say there's that, maybe there's this, I'm criticizing myself, or I'm noticing perfectionism show up. Like, what I hear there is that that's almost sounds like a second voice that I would like um, to maybe go through and do a round with that perfectionism.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's so good to, I think people, if you have time, some people, are able to do it on a regular basis. And if you can set aside the time to do that, yeah, I definitely think, the breath afterwards and stopping and taking some mental notes and then going back into it again and really all the way back to the beginning, start with that setup again, I think and you're almost like you've drilled down into one layer, right? And so if you have time, you could almost drill down into another layer and find even more comfort, even more grounding, maybe discover more about why you're feeling the way you're feeling about something. So definitely more than one session is if you're feeling up to it and it aligns for you, that's definitely a good idea.
Mm. And, what if, like, have you had people who become really emotional or extremely vulnerable after this? Like, how do you help them understand that, or how do you help them process afterwards if they're feeling really
Yeah.
tender?
Yeah, I think the acknowledgement and the awareness of it is key. That's definitely the first piece. Don't try to stuff that down or ignore that or feel like you did it wrong if you're feeling especially more vulnerable, or if tears start coming during the session, that's okay. That's, we're tapping into something, getting down into those layers. And you might not even be able to assign a reason or a story to it. That's okay. You just let things come up as they are, and if we can allow that, it makes all the difference. So, being aware and allowing it, not judging it, is absolute key. So reassuring them that this is okay. Even if you've never felt like this after a tapping session before, let's embrace it. Let's sit with it for a minute. Maybe you need a little more quiet time afterwards. There's sometimes where I myself will just sit in silence for quite a while to just experience the feelings and experience where you're at in that moment. Um, but yeah, guiding them through. I think those are probably the best general ways to think about it. Each person will have a little bit of a different nuance, a different reason why they're feeling a certain way, or but to be aware and to accept it, to allow these feelings to be whatever they are, whatever shape or size they show up in, is a huge key to feeling better and moving forward with the tool.
Mm. And, we talked a little bit earlier about like, the being guided versus doing it on your own. And so I definitely found it valuable to have you here. And I like that it was general enough, I was able to kind of specify toward myself. Like at what point would you usually encourage people to begin to experiment on their own?
I think when you've reached out to enough other people and you kind of have a sense for the flow, Um, but maybe what they're talking about, you can't quite find a video or a teacher or somebody that has produced some content that really fits for you. Maybe it's a real specific situation that you're dealing with or a feeling that the words they're using is just not quite hitting it. I think that would be a great time to, like we've kind of talked about, maybe you're planning far enough ahead that you can take some paper and a pen, and even if it's 5 minutes before the session, jot down some ideas, or what is it that the other folks are doing that's not quite fitting for you? Um, or if you just feel like, for me, it was more, I just didn't want to be dependent on other videos and other things. I felt like I had the desire to develop that muscle a little bit more on my own, so that I wasn't totally beholden to somebody else to get me through it, but it's definitely appropriate as you're first starting. We all need a little hand holding at the beginning when we're learning anything. And so I think I'm so glad that there's folks out there that are doing it. And that especially those that have been doing it for a long time that I feel like I trust, even though I don't know them in person. But yeah, whenever I would say those two reasons, either you're not finding something that really fits for you, or you want to start to develop that muscle on your own. But that those pre-done scripts are out there for you. If it just doesn't feel right, or you're not gaining ground as fast as you want, there's no shame in going back and listening to a couple. Maybe you need to listen to one and then do your own, right back to back, like we were just talking about. That's all of those ways are good.
Yeah, part of what I heard you say there's really kind of building this, you know, utilizing the tools and the resources that are out there as a resource for you to help to discover your own intuition so that you can maybe do this, you know, in closer alignment with who you are and what you need and where you're going and kind of really discovering that, that self and that self leadership with it. We talked about this for a second, but I want to talk about uh skepticism, placebo effect. Uh, what would you respond to people who say that maybe this is a placebo effect, or if they're skeptical, like or even what's like skepticism protecting for people when they think
Yeah.
about this?
Yeah, definitely is. That's a really good question, right? That even just saying it makes you aware of, if you're listening to us right now and you're feeling skeptical, just having the question brought to your awareness could reveal something that's happening for you. There is always a little bit of fear in either trying something new or making progress on your healing journey, because healing means unknown a little bit. We don't know really what that feels like further up the road. And you might have a feeling that, yeah, I see what they're saying, but and it's more fear than skepticism possibly. Um, but definitely, you mentioned like placebo effect, and I'm good with that. I like, regardless of why it's working, if I feel better, I'm okay with a placebo. I'm okay with all of that. So, And like I said, I have a client who says I could force her. I could say, let's try it anyway. But I don't think that's so beneficial, right? I think if you're skeptical, there's enough tools for healing out there. You're going to find something that works for you. You're going to find a way. If you're intent on healing, if you're intent in this journey, um, you're going to find a way, you're going to find a tool that works. So, I would say, yeah, to just, if you're skeptical, move on. It's okay. Don't push it because it's not going to help anybody, right?
So Jen, if somebody wanted to make tapping kind of like part of their daily rhythm, part of their daily life, like where would you suggest that they start?
Yeah, I think very general. And like we talked about already, things that aren't super triggering, not necessarily a situation that would take you from a 0 to a 10, but maybe something that would take you from a 2 to a 4 or a 5. Um, And, maybe the common thing is, the joke is my spouse is chewing, right? And that's a bother. So maybe something that's more of a bother than a full out trigger would be a good place to start, just to give yourself a little stability as you're looking at, because your focus is learning the tool, right? When we're first started, we're focused so much on the tool that we may not be able to really deal with the issue at hand quite as much as when we don't have, 10 years later, you're not thinking about the tool anymore. It's very second nature. And now you're fully dialed into the real issues at hand. At the very beginning, you're thinking about the tool and how it feels and how it doesn't feel and what you were expecting and how it's different than what you were expecting. So I would say some easier things and maybe more in a quiet space. A lot of people can work on it to a point where you can be on a city bus and you can tap on your collarbone and feel okay about that. That's not necessarily going to be probably what most people experience the first couple of times they do it. So maybe a private spot, and at a time where you know how much time you have. You know you're not going to get interrupted. Even if it's 10 minutes, it doesn't have to be a full hour, but you know you have at least 10 minutes that are uninterrupted and you can take a minute to think this through and see how it feels and see how your body's reacting.
Mm. It feels like it'd be something that like when possible to do it in the moment, versus like planned sit down. Is there a big like, do you really recommend to try to do it in the moment, or is it okay to say, 8 a.m. is the time I have every morning? Like, can I sit down and just do it as a planned, I was gonna say a planned workout session, but
Yeah,
like
kind
a,
of.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say, both, and I know that that's hard for people to hear. I think a lot of times people want a prescription, right? Do this, do it this way, do it at this time, and that's easier. It takes the decision-making process off of us, which we just need sometimes, and it's okay to want that. But with this tool, it is really flexible. So I would say, at the beginning, you might only remember when you're in the moment. It might be 8 o'clock at night and a guy cut you off in traffic. It might be 12 o'clock in the afternoon. And, it could be a lot of different times and things. Oh, yeah, that tapping thing. And you might want to try it at that moment, and that's totally okay. And it's also okay to have a set time. I know 8 a.m. every morning. I have this window of time where I can sit down and think about what happened yesterday and how I was triggered, or knowing what I know about myself. I know that this situation tomorrow, or just this feeling that keeps coming up. And there are plenty of things to work on, even if you're not triggered in the moment. I know there's a lot of people who start to make it, like you said, a daily part of their practice, where it's kind of their morning ritual or their evening ritual before they go to bed. For me, I tend to use it when I need it. I think ritual is really good, and Tim talks about that we do need some of that in our lives. Our inner child might kind of fight against that a little bit. I don't want to do the same thing at the same time every day. I think we need that, and if this is the tool that fits there for you, I think it's a great thing to do, to have that kind of a scheduled piece in your life. We all need that. For me, the tapping is not necessarily one of those things that I do every day at a certain time. I use it when I need it. Like we talked about, before a workshop, I'm nervous. My daughter just drove down the road for the first time. I'm feeling some activated. I'm feeling some nervousness, and all sorts of other things throughout the day. I used to use it with my kids. If they were fighting, okay, let's sit down and talk about this and tap through. And sometimes you might be triggered and you use this to get yourself a little more grounded before you go into a conversation that you know is going to be difficult, and you can show up a little more grounded, a little more your best self. And maybe it's not the thing that you use for the conversation, but sort of the prep work that you might want to do, or the post work. You had a conversation, you had a situation, and you're feeling activated. So a lot of different ways and places and times to use it.
Yeah. So there can be a lot of flexibility and variability, but then also if you desire, like do it in this orderly way at a particular time. How about we talked about this a little bit at the beginning, but like flexibility within it, within the tapping itself, like you can change the order. Um, you mentioned you could do one, like it seemed like you were going down one side. Do you ever shift sides, or do you do both sides? Like, is that all like just personal preference, or is that a choice? That okay, so personal preference mostly.
Yeah, I think people can make that choice too. I know I just have tendencies, like when I'm maybe a little more like when I'm in front of somebody, when I'm doing this interview, when I'm doing a workshop, I tend to, my right hand is my dominant hand. So I think I just feel stronger probably without realizing it in that hand. And I tend to just stay on the right side because I'm also teaching and thinking about what I'm saying. When I'm, in my space by myself, I switch it up a lot just kind of based on I've used it long enough now that I know what feels good. Um, in this situation differently than in that situation yesterday. Sometimes I do just use the pressure, sometimes not. Sometimes I do both sides. Sometimes I cross it where I use my right hand on my left side and my left hand on my right side. And I like to play around with it and kind of exercise that muscle a little bit and in knowing how to use the tool. So
Yeah, and I liked, and you explained at the beginning too. I really liked even just that point of like holding the one spot. So there's like it sounds like holding or rubbing could maybe be supportive in doing this as well. So as we're moving towards closing here, I want to ask you, Jen. So if somebody listening has forgotten everything that we said about tapping points, scripts, or structure, what would be one thing that you would want them to remember?
yeah, I think just allowing what trusting that intuition. I think I just want to put my hand over my heart and allow that. Don't judge it. Don't put it in a box that needs a certain definition. I think that's really why tapping works well for me, and why I've made it work well, because I'm able to see where all of those points of flexibility and not just make the prescription that you only have to do it this way. So yeah, just allow yourself to feel what you feel, to need what you need, and it's okay.
And I like that. I like that the point of allowing. Those sound like some great last words. And so, Jen, I want to thank you for being here with us today. And especially the way that you offer this. It's like there's this like real way that we're allowed to kind of rediscover, but also stay in this relationship with ourselves.
Yeah.
And for those listening, I hope something in this conversation gave you permission to slow down and to listen to your own nervous system with a little more kindness, and to meet what's here, allowing and respecting yourself at your own pace. And as always, take care of yourselves, and remember that healing doesn't come from pushing yourself to be different, but it comes from learning how to stay with yourself moment by moment. And we'll see you next time. Thanks again, Jen.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on the Time with Tim podcast. If you'd like to share your own experiences or have questions, feel free to email us at podcasts@timfletcher.ca. Want to learn more about complex trauma? Subscribe to Tim Fletcher's YouTube channel for past lectures and his Friday night Tim Talks. You can also connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and TikTok. Looking for more support? We offer programs and courses to help with healing complex trauma and recovering from addictions. Visit timfletcher.ca to learn more or send us an inquiry. We're here to support you. Until we meet again, take care and thank you for letting us be a part of your healing journey.